Portable hangboards are a training tool used by climbers to warm up when you're outdoor bouldering. They're really handy if there aren't many warm-up climbs around or if your skin's feeling a little bit fragile. I made this portable hangboard with 4 different hold types, and you can hang it up using a sling, a piece of rope and a carabiner. I started with an idea. The idea was to replicate a portable hangboard that I'd seen online. It was small enough to fit in a backpack and looked really easy to set up. I needed a couple of large slots for warming up with and a few smaller edges for getting ready for hard projects. 400 centimeters wide and 105 centimeters tall. First off, I checked I had everything I needed: a circular saw, a router, a drill, rulers, clamps and a sander. I used birch-faced ply to build the board, but before I started cutting that, I built a template out of a piece of scrap wood. The template would be used as a guide for cutting around the edges of our real board. You make the template slightly smaller than the real board because when we run a router around the edge of the template, it will leave a couple of centimeters gap. I wanted smooth corners on my hangboard, and so I used a jigsaw to round the corners on my template. Once the template was done, I started off work on the real board. The first thing to do is cut the plywood roughly to the size that we need. At this point, I marked out the handholds on my wooden board. This is the really cool thing. You get to pick exactly how deep and how wide all of your handholds are going to be. Because I wanted a couple of really deep slots, you'll notice that I actually glued 2 pieces of plywood together.
Oh my god!
Next, I took the template and I secured it onto the plywood board so that I could use it as a runner for the router. As you go around the edge of the board with a router, it trims off a layer of wood, but you can't trim off the whole depth of the board at once. You have to do it in several passes, because the router is quite difficult to control, and if you try and take off too much wood at once, it's a really difficult task. I sanded off the edges and the board was starting to take shape, but the most important step comes next, cutting out the holes. Again, I used a router for this.
Plunge it in, what you have to do is start, say there, then just pull it back a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, don't try and plunge it dead on the line because you won't.
So I'm going to do a run all the way along there.
Yeah.
You plunge it into the wood and then push it along to carve out a slot. It's quite a tricky tool to master, but I slowly got the hang of it. The biggest lesson I learned here was to buy a bigger router piece so that I'd only have to do 1 pass to make a slot big enough. Because my router piece was quite small, I had to try and line up 2 passes to make a slot.
You're gonna settle for that much.
I finished off the holes by sanding out the insides and cleaning up any loose bits of wood that remained until they felt really comfortable to nestle my fingers in. I was really happy with how the hangboard was looking now, but it still needed a way to hang it up. I looked online to see how other hangboards were attached to rope, and I chose what I thought was the best method and adapted that for my board. The trick here is to cut slots into the top corners of the hangboard. Make sure they go at least halfway down on the sides. I flipped the board over and drilled 2 large holes into the back of the board that linked up to the slots. This allowed me to feed rope through and tie it off.